Welcome everybody. I think we're going to get started. So people might trickle in, but I want to make sure that, I want to respect the fact that you guys came on time. So we'll get started. My name is Dushani Palliyaguru, and I'm currently the co-founder and CEO of Health Surveil. It's an organization based in the US. We're a health tech startup that specializes in preventing and controlling chronic diseases that are related to aging. So today I'm going to be talking to you about how to decode longevity and healthy aging. This is going to be an overview session. I'm going to basically talk about how to thrive through time. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I want to share some tips on how to age well, also share some of the work that I have done in my research career. And I want to make this as interactive as possible. I know we have a small group, but that's actually a good thing. I have some exercises that I would encourage you to participate in. Don't be shy. I'm going to ask you some questions. So please feel free to participate as well. First of all, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction on myself. I know many of you, but there are a few people who don't probably know me. So I haven't lived in Sri Lanka for close to about 18 years now, but I did my primary and secondary schooling here. I did my O-levels and A-levels in Sri Lanka, and then I got a scholarship to go to Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, to major in biochemistry and molecular biology, and also mathematics, a minor in mathematics. And then I wanted to do something that was very focused on human health, so I did a PhD in environmental and occupational health. And then after that, I did 2 postdocs. So this is sort of typically required when you do a PhD, that you get postdoctoral training. So I did 2 postdocs, one at University of Pittsburgh and another one at the National Institute on Aging. So this is really where I got to learn a lot about aging, healthy aging, and longevity. And then ever since, I've been trying to work in that direction for my scientific career. Then I wanted to come up with solutions for the problems that I was seeing in this world related to human health. So I founded my organization, Health Surveil. And I also, outside of that, I work as a consultant with the WHO. I recently started doing some research collaboration work with University of Colombo, the Faculty of Medicine, and I also work as a senior toxicologist within my organization. So I have no conflicts of interest to declare for this presentation. Now we're going to spend a little bit of time trying to get to know each other, so you have a better sense of who I am. I want to get to know who you are, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that'll really get you thinking about aging, longevity, and lifespan. Okay? So the first question, it's a little existential, but bear with me and try to be as honest, and hopefully you'll get into the flow of it. So the question is, how old would you like to live until, if it were up to you, and you could be completely healthy? Okay? So the options are less than 80 years old, 80 to 90, 90 to 100, 100 to 120, and more than 120. So less than 80, show of hands. Wow. Okay. 80 to 90. Okay, good. 90 to 100. None. 100 to 120. Okay, we have a winner here. All right, one more. More than 120. Anybody? All right. Okay, so you're going higher now. Okay. All right, great. Okay, second question. Welcome. Second question is, do you worry about chronic diseases as you get older? And this includes heart disease, diabetes, dementia, cancer, and others. So I think I know what the responses are going to be for this. Yes or no? Yeses? No? Oh, okay, interesting. Next question, what brings you to this session today? So are you looking for information and resources for yourself, for your family and friends, your employees and workers, for your patients and clients? There might be some doctors here, or you're just browsing, you're not really sure why you're here, and it's too late to leave. So first one, for yourself. Okay? Family and friends. Okay? Employees and workers. Okay? Patients and clients. Great. Unsure? Not really sure. Probably my husband. All Right.
There's no option.
Yeah. Other, yeah. Okay, so this is an outline what I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to talk about health, aging, and disease. I'm going to touch upon the Sri Lankan context, particularly because I think it's applicable to many of us. And then I'm going to talk about how we measure aging. Last, I'm going to touch on a couple of interventions for healthy aging. These are things that perhaps you could do, or so things that are in the research arena, really up and coming as well. So what is human health and what determines how healthy you are, right? So by definition, I think we think of health as the absence of disease, but there are many things that determine how healthy you are. So I'm going to try to build a pyramid for you today. At the very bottom of the pyramid, or the fundamental, are genetics and biology. Now this includes what you're born with and how your cells and organs respond to changes, particularly as you get older. Then beyond that, you have your environment. This includes the air that you breathe, the water that you drink, products that you use, where you live and work, how much traffic pollution you're exposed to, and all of these other things. Then you also have your behaviors. This includes what you eat, how much you exercise, how much you smoke and drink alcohol, how much you sleep, and other things as well. And of course, in spite of scientific advancements that we have made over the past few decades, there are many things that we still don't fully understand about what determines human health. So I left a question mark there and said other factors. How does aging play into all of this? Aging is the number one risk factor for almost all chronic diseases. So there's an epidemic of chronic illness that's killing us too soon all over the world. And this is true for Sri Lanka as well. And many of you may have encountered family members, or maybe you yourself might be concerned about some of these diseases like heart disease, cancer, chronic lung disease, stroke, diabetes, and chronic kidney disease. What we see when you factor in aging is the fact that when people are older, this is data from the Global Burden of Disease study, when people are younger, so if you look at the graph towards the left side of the corner, you see your younger age groups. And towards the right side, you see the older age groups. So when you're young, you don't see a lot of chronic diseases in the population, which is true, right? This is not rocket science. However, as the population gets older, there will be a lot more people who have these chronic diseases. So at the end of the day, the number of people with chronic disease increases with age. So this is really why aging is so important when you think about chronic diseases. Now, what's happening in Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka has the highest percentage of older adults in South Asia. Now, older adults by definition are people who are older than 65 years of age. The average in the world in terms of a percentage is about 10%. So 10% of the world's population is 65 years or older. In Sri Lanka, it's slightly over 12.4%. So it's slightly higher than the global average. So we have a lot of older adults in Sri Lanka, and you might also notice this anecdotally within your communities. So what's happening within our older adults? What sort of diseases do they have, and what are they dying with most importantly? Again, this is data from the Global Burden of Disease study, and this looks at the deaths that you see per 100,000, so the rate of deaths in Sri Lanka, and this includes both males and females. As you see in younger groups, like we saw earlier, you don't see a lot of deaths related to these diseases. But as they get older, you see a lot of Alzheimer's. So this is what's in red. You see a lot of cardiovascular disease. This includes heart attacks, strokes, and things like that. And then you also see neoplasms or cancers. And then you also see type 2 diabetes. So I picked what we call sort of the 4 horsemen of these chronic diseases and included it in this chart. So as our Sri Lankan older adults get advance in age, they develop these diseases and they also tend to die from these diseases. And this is actually work that I did with University of Colombo, and we have a preprint out right now. So if anybody is interested in reading more about this research within the context of dementia, I encourage you to go on medRxives and look at this paper. So we're going to do a small exercise. So this is the first exercise we're going to do. I'm going to flash 5 words on the screen. I want you to read it carefully and try to remember it. Now, later on in the presentation, I'm going to ask you to recall it. Okay? Why are we doing this? Cognitive decline is one of the most important things that we see in older adults. So as we get older, we lose our memory. This is a known fact. So one of the things we do in our clinics, and also to assess how well people are aging cognitively, we do a battery of tests. So one of the tests we use is called the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test. And this is one part of the MOCA, or the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test. So if you perform poorly on this, does not mean you have cognitive decline. But I just want you to appreciate the fact that, cognitive decline is real. It's something that we have to measure in our older adults. So hopefully we'll be able to, participate in this. So the first word is face. Second is velvet. Third, church. Fourth, daisy. Fifth, red. Okay? So just remember these. I'm going to ask you to recall these later. Okay. So within aging, there's a discrepancy between expectation and reality, right? So we all know that we're going to age. We don't know how well we're going to age. But in our heads, we have this expectation. And these expectations are shaped by a variety of different factors, including celebrities who are aging, what we see in society, and so on. So one example would be how Brad Pitt is aging, right? So he went from a young, good-looking man to a good-looking, middle-aged person to a relatively older adult now who's also still good-looking. So aesthetically speaking, he's doing well. But it's not just the aesthetics or the way you look that comes into play when it comes to aging. This is a woman. Her name's Varta Shanmuganathan. She's of Sri Lankan descent. She's 87 years old. She recently graduated from University of York in Canada with a master's in political science. So this is all pretty great, right? This is what we aspire to be as we get older. We want to continue to do the same things that we did when we were younger, and we want to, continue to learn, continue to thrive, continue to, learn and be part of our communities in a very interactive way. Post-retirement, we want to be financially sound, we want to be financially independent, sort of do our own things. We want to be able to travel, we want to be able to have our own communities, really thrive through our 70s, 80s, 90s, and even to 150 or whatever your goal is. However, the reality is actually very different, and you might have experienced some of this within your own families and friends and communities as well. We unfortunately see a lot of older adults who have very serious illnesses. We see a lot of older adults who are dependent on younger people, maybe family members or caretakers. That can lead to a lot of psychological stresses for these older adults. We also see loss of mobility, loss of movement because of chronic conditions. And then most importantly, we also see individuals who suffer falls and might have fractures, and that could really affect the way they age and live the rest of their life. So their quality of life really goes down after experiencing something like this. So we've talked about aging. The question is, what is it? Why do we age? Where is it originating? So we see aging at different levels. So the way I like to look at it, we call it, as a scientist, we say at the phenotypic level, this is essentially what you see on the surface. So again, you might be familiar with some of these. You see reduced gait, which is the speed at which you walk tends to become slower as you get older. Reduced strength, so meaning you might not be able to grip things as well when you get older. Increased frailty, so you become frail and you become, there's a lot of loss of muscle mass as you get older. Increased visceral fat, this is something that a lot of us have a problem with. There's, especially around midlife, you tend to accumulate a lot of abdominal fat, right? And this is also a function of aging, as research is sort of starting to show. And then we also see reduced memory. We talked about cognitive decline. There's reduced decision to reaction time. So you might see something, the time that it takes for you to react to that can be longer in older adults. And then there's also reduced visual perception. So, your depth perception might change as you get older. And then collectively, this really leads to a lot of functional deficit, and you might not be able to, do the same things that you once were able to do when you were younger. Now, what's really exciting is that a lot of these changes that you see on the surface is driven or preceded by changes that happen at the cellular level. So this is driven by changes that are happening in your cells. And there are what we call hallmarks of aging. There's more than a dozen right now as of 2023. And I've listed a few here. So these are changes that are happening inside your cells that really drives these changes that happen on the surface. So this includes things like genomic instability. We talked about genetics earlier. So what genomic instability means that your genome becomes unstable as you get older. And then also your telomeres, the ends of your chromosomes, if you're familiar with biology, those sort of act as these protective caps for your genome, and they tend to get shorter as you get older. And then there are many others as well. Your metabolism slows down, the way you process nutrients changes, and many things that are happening at the cellular level that ultimately gives rise to these changes at the global phenotypic level. So what really happens with aging is that there are many things. The simplest way to think of it is it's a breakdown of your system as you get older for a variety of different reasons. So it could be due to repeated chronic exposures, accumulation of cellular damage, loss of cellular defenses, and also impaired resilience and recovery. Okay, so you're well at one point when you're younger, but due to certain accumulations and not being able to recover from these accumulations, your systems essentially break down. Your cells, your organs, and also like your function. Now what happens is, as you get older, the probability of developing chronic diseases goes up. We talked about this earlier. So this happens during average aging. So we're all going to age, no matter what you do, we're going to age in a certain trajectory. But what research and what science is actually showing us is that there's a way to sort of perturb or move that a little bit towards a healthy aging trajectory. What can you get by doing that? You can actually reduce the probability of developing these chronic diseases if you do follow a healthy aging trajectory. Okay? So this brings me to the second exercise. So this is going to be a quiz style. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Please interact, shout out answers. The first one is, what is the maximum recorded human lifespan?
100. Egypt.
Oh.
Someone who had only camel milk and had a dough or something.
Really?
Yes.
I'm not aware of this.
And he lived up to 200.
Okay,
That was news.
Okay, so I guess this is in more recent history that's recorded, and there's evidence for it. So I'm not really aware of this, but I have to look it up.
120.
Close, very close. It's actually 122. Okay. Second question. Who's the current oldest person, and how old is she or he? This person's still alive as of a week ago?
Yes. 115?
Close.
There were 2, one died.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so impressed. You guys are, you're really keeping up with the longevity news. So her name's Maria Branes, and she's 117 years old. She's an American Spanish national. She lives in Spain. Third and last question for this. What mammalian species has the longest lifespan? Close. It's up there.
The giant
Clams?
tortoise?
Variety of clams.
Mammal.
Mammals.
Mammals. So you're right with the clams. They're really up there, but the question is about mammals. Good. 50% of the answer we have.
Humpback is?
No, not humpback. It's the bowhead whale. Okay, so I know this is not related to human health, but I just wanted to share this infographic So this shows sort of on a timeline the maximum recorded lifespans of these species. So we got elephant about 65. So clams here, it's about 400 something years. So good guess. Bowhead whale is 211. The giant tortoise is right here. You get the smaller species right here. So very good. I'm very impressed. Okay. So we're going to jump into the next section and talk about how we measure aging.
Hydra lives long, but it's arguable whether they are multicellular organisms. Hydras
Hydra?
are multicellular
Yes.
organism is very primitive organism,
Correct.
like group of cells, like
Correct. Yes. Yes.
something like developed like nerves, like things are developed.
Yes. Yes. So Hydra is considered to be immortal, but yes, in terms of classification.
Immortal because of the cells. which are
Correct.
developed.
Yes. So, how do we measure aging? I'm going to talk about two examples for this. One is sort of fancy and hot in the news right now. The second one is something a lot more achievable for many of us. So, the first one is predicting biological aging. And this example is from a tech millionaire. His name's Brian Johnson. He's the CEO of a company called Blueprint. And his goal right now is to achieve immortality by reducing his biological age. Now, what is biological age, right? So chronologically speaking, we all have an age, and that's what's on our passports, on our birth certificates, or our national IDs. There's a number that says this is how old you are. But what we see in our populations and in our people is that depending on your behaviors, your genetics, your environments, and other factors, your biological age might actually be higher or lower than your actual chronological age, okay? So, by trying to reduce his biological age, this tech millionaire, or Brian Johnson, is trying to achieve immortality, or trying to at least live a very long life, perhaps more than 150 years or so. For this, he has assembled a team of various healthcare professionals and scientists, and he's really trying to, he's on a very strict diet regimen, exercise regimen, getting a lot of work done. He's on a supplement regimen that includes more than 100 supplements. So it's really out there. 116. There you go. So it's really it's attracting a lot of attention and funding to the field. So as a scientist, it's great to see. However, it also promises a lot of things to people, which we're really not sure whether this is realistic or not. So what is biological age? It asks you the question, how old are you biologically? And there are ways to measure this. This is really the cool part. So what you need is a biological sample, maybe a blood sample from your from a blood draw from when you go to your doctor's or your clinic. And then what we look for are these methylation patterns in your DNA, right? So we talked about genetics earlier. With changes that's related to aging due to the environment, behaviors, and other factors, your genome changes. And what we call this is called epigenetics. So methylation is a type of epigenetic change that will tell you how old you are biologically. So by applying some mathematics and some algorithms, you're able to get a weighted methylation average that will tell you whether you have accelerated aging or decelerated aging, right? So then the question becomes, are you a fast ager or a slow ager? If you're a fast ager, then how do you slow your aging down? And if you're a slow ager, how do you continue to be a slow ager until, the end of time, I guess? These tests are unfortunately very expensive. I think in the US, it costs about $300 per blood test, maybe slightly cheaper, depending on the company. So it's not affordable for many of us, right? But what I want to highlight is that it's not just these fancy blood tests that you have to do in order to understand how well or poorly you're aging. You can even think of a simple metric like fasting blood glucose to better understand how well you're aging. Now, fasting blood glucose, you're probably familiar. This is a measure that you use for diabetics to keep track of how well you're responding to treatment, whether there are changes as you as your disease progresses or gets better. This is a relatively simple blood test that you can do with a needle prick. So even with simple tracking of fasting blood glucose, you can tell how well you're aging. And this is work that I actually did while I was a postdoc at the National Institute on Aging. It was published a couple of years ago in Cell Metabolism. What we did was we looked at a group of individuals who were healthy and non-diabetic. So this included more than 3,000 people. And we measured their fasting blood glucose over their lifespans. So this was a study that was started in the 1950s. So continuously these people would come in for their measurements, and then you measure their fasting blood glucose levels, and then you keep track of what happens over time. This is essentially how aging research is done. What we saw was that fasting glucose tends to go up with age, and these are healthy individuals, okay? So it goes up to about 100, so it's still they're non-diabetic by definition. And then after about 70, 75, these levels start to gradually decline a little bit. Then what we did was we wanted to understand the relationship between fasting glucose and mortality. So what do I mean by that? If you have high fasting glucose, even though you're healthy, would you die earlier? And if you have low fasting glucose, would you die later? So we also track their mortality, meaning when do these people die, how long are they alive for, and so on. So we took that information, we constructed what we call a survival analysis, and this is a Kaplan-Meier survival curve. And what we did was we compared people in the high fasting glucose range and the low fasting glucose range. And what we saw was that even in these healthy non-diabetic people, the high fasting glucose people tend to die earlier compared to the people who had low fasting glucose. So the take home, without getting into technical details, is measuring and controlling your blood glucose can help you age better and live longer. Again, so this is just a very simple test that you can do. And I'm not saying, from now on you have to go, get fasting blood glucose measurements, but this is something, if you have an annual exam, they will probably measure. So it's important to keep track of what's happening as you get older. And then there are also other metabolic markers that you can, and you probably might be already keeping track of. This includes body weight and body fat. So for example, the recommendation is if you can measure, if you are interested in really, how well you're aging and you're health conscious, you can measure your blood glucose and your body fat every year. The gold standard for measuring body fat are DEXA scans. They're unfortunately also very expensive. And there are some alternatives that I will try to discuss today. And then you can use a measuring tape, and I'm going to show you how to do it today. You can measure your waist circumference or your waist to hip ratio. That will tell you what's happening with your visceral fat or abdominal fat, because that's actually a huge predictor of your health and aging. And your body weight, you can measure on a weekly basis or so, maybe like a monthly basis. And many of you probably already do this. And you can measure what your BMI is, so that takes into account your height and whether your weight range is at a sort of a healthy range or something that you need to work on. So we're gonna just do another exercise, how to measure your waist circumference. So you're probably familiar with it, but I'm just gonna show you, I actually found a measuring tape just for this. So what you want to do is you wanna stand up straight and exhale. Right? Sometimes you see people inhaling, sucking everything in, and then trying to, reduce the number, but that's not really accurate. So you want to get an accurate number. So you want to wrap the tape measure right above your hip bone, right? And then without light tightening or loosening the tape. So again, you don't want to tighten it too much. You're probably familiar with this, right? And then I'm not going to announce what my waist is to people. But anyway, and then you can take the reading. Oh boy. And then you should maintain a diary. Okay. And then there are scales out there. You can sort of go online and try to see whether your number fits for your height, whether there are some things that you need to work on. I really recommend doing this. And this is particularly important. Like we talked about Sri Lankans. Sri Lankans don't tend to, be obese overall. We have this phenotype where we accumulate a lot of fat, either in the abdominal area or also ectopic fat accumulation, what we call. There's a lot of liver fat accumulation that we see, a lot of fat inside the muscle, subcutaneous fat between organs. So you actually might be able to get a good readout of how well your fat levels are if you do these waist circumference measurements. And of course, this is not a highly accurate test, and it's not going to tell you, this is exactly where your fat levels are, because it's just going to measure the abdominal area. But it's a good surrogate marker of what you're doing overall. Okay, so fun. We're going to recall the words now. Who remembers? Okay, yes. Do 5 words.
Yeah, space a little bit. Church. Daisy Ray.
Woo!
Wow.
Very nice. At least one person doesn't have cognitive decline. Although I said that this is not. Okay, this is great. Okay, so how many words could you recall?
4.
4?
I'm not
Okay,
sure.
be honest.
Couple of
Okay.
you at church. Did
Okay.
you see that?
When I did it, I was at 2. So I was like, okay, something's happening. But again, I want to stress, if you weren't able to recall it, doesn't mean, you're doing bad cognitively. It's just one aspect of cognitive decline that you measure. So just wanted to, put it out there, help you learn that this is one of the things that, we measure with our patients. So we're going to next talk about interventions for healthy aging. I'm not going to talk about too many here. I'm going to talk about things that I have worked on, but there are many that we can really discuss. So there's a whole host that you've probably heard of already, from physical activity or exercise, strength training, yoga, to healthy behaviors, to sleep, to mindfulness and cognitive health, exercises, to community and belonging. So these overlap really well with what you probably hear in the wellness arena. So I'm not going to touch upon this much because you already have probably a lot of information on this. We all know this is important to do, but so I'm not going to talk much about it. Outside of that, there are many other interventions as well. Some of them are still at the research level. So for example, diet, it's something I have worked with very closely and I'm going to talk more about. And then supplements is also something I have worked with. So I'm going to talk about those two in particular. And then drugs is like it's an emerging area with a lot of hot research happening. However, we don't really have any drugs per se for aging because aging is not considered as a condition. It's not a disease, because of which we cannot really develop any drugs for disease. But there's a lot of pushback for it from pharmaceutical companies that are trying to get this definition changed so that we can produce drugs for aging. What's interesting, there are some conditions that are very strongly associated with aging, things that we didn't really discuss earlier, like sarcopenia, which is as you get older, you lose muscle weight, you lose muscle mass. You've probably heard of this term called wasting. So there are a lot of companies that are developing drugs for conditions like sarcopenia, okay? And there are randomized controlled trials happening around the world for some of these conditions, and we're yet to see how this field is going to move forward. And then we also have gene therapy. Gene therapy essentially uses manipulation techniques to change your genome. And this is also an up and coming field that's still at the research level. Hopefully within the next decade or so, we might see some changes that are relevant to this. And then digital health and AI, this is something that I am currently involved in within my company. This is to integrate technologies and develop technologies that can be used for older adults that can really improve their well-being and in terms of assistive technologies and things like that. So like I said, I'm going to talk about diet and supplements. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So diet for improved aging, is there a hype or is there hope? So a lot of these examples or a lot of this work within diet and aging has been done in model organisms, right? So showing explicitly that a particular diet works against an aging phenotype or an aging observation has to be done in a controlled environment. And one of the ways to do it is in model organisms, in research laboratories. So you can do it in mice, you can do it in rats, and you can do it in other small organisms. You can also do it in primates, like monkeys. I know this is a little bit of a touchy subject for some people, but they're actually a very valuable model system to understand what's happening in humans because they're very similar biologically to humans. And typically these monkeys are treated really nicely, and they live very happy and healthy lives. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So in this experiment that was done in 2014 out of University of Wisconsin, what they did was they took a colony of monkeys and they divided into two. So they randomized them and divided into two. One group ate a controlled diet, so the standard amount of calories. However, the second group, they were calorically restricted, meaning they ate lesser number of calories compared to the control group. Okay, so here in this graph, this is again a survival curve. What you see is, so the red line shows the control animals, how they died, with time as they get older. And then the black line shows the calorically restricted animals, how they died. What you see here is that the calorically restricted animals tended to live longer than the animals who are eating the normal number of calories. So was it just in terms of lifespan? Now we know that if you eat lesser calories, these monkeys were able to live a longer lifespan. But this is actually true for their health span as well. So this is just a pictorial of, on the left side, you see Canto, who was 25 years old. He was on a calorie restricted diet. So he was eating about 450 calories per day. And then on the right side, you have Owen, who's 26, so around the same age, and he was eating double the number of calories. So you can appreciate some of the differences on the surface. And what you see was that Canto, they sort of did the blood work, they did a bunch of tests on these animals. So Canto, the calorically restricted animal, actually had less frailty, had good gait and good posture. He had a nice shiny coat, even at 25 years old. And he also had normal blood work, meaning he was relatively healthier. Owen, on the other hand, who was eating double the calories as Canto, was frail, had sort of you can see his coat doesn't look very good. He also had high glucose and high triglycerides in his blood work. He was frail, he had arthritis, he had wobbly gait, so he wasn't able to walk. And of course, these are two just single examples, but this was observed across the entire colony of animals because they used a number of animals to get to this conclusion. And you can also appreciate that Owen on the surface looks a little sickly compared to Canto. So I want to highlight that data in humans is not as straightforward. So just because you are calorie restricted, maybe in some cases, if you're calorie restricted, you might notice some of these changes, but it's a lot more complicated in humans. But a lot of people that maybe you've spoken to who are doing various calorie restricted diets within the context of intermittent fasting, maybe time restricted feeding and things like that, do actually report benefits, and that might be related to weight loss or metabolic regulation. So there are some randomized control trials that are happening that will tell us exactly what's happening with humans, but we don't have a very clear picture yet about this. So there are also different types of diets, and I want to highlight this within the context of the brain because this is, again, an active area of research for us, how diets and how interventions can really improve cognitive health. So there are various different diets that people like to discuss. Mediterranean diet, DASH diet, MIND, vegetarian, vegan, ketogenic diet, and combination of two. So what seems to be happening is that a lot of these diets tend to work at the cellular level. They can reduce inflammation in the brain that happens as you get older. They can also reduce insulin resistance that happens as you get older. And they also have, these diets might be high in antioxidants that could also potentially contribute to their positive effects. And they also, I didn't have time to talk about this, but this is another huge area. These diets can actually alter your gut microbiome. So your healthy bacteria that's living in your gut, they have been shown to have a direct impact on your brain function. And this is a very hot area of research right now. So this also can directly change the way your brain works and the way your cognition progresses as you get older. So I want to touch upon supplements next. And again, the question is there a hype or is there hope? So there are many supplements out there. Unfortunately, this is also an area where there are a lot of snake oil salesmen. So somebody's going to promise you, oh, this is going to age you really well. Every day, every week, I get articles saying, hey, is this good for you? Is this good? But it's very important to sort of separate out scientific findings from just hype and excitement that people have. So I'm going to show work that I did during my career that are related to supplements that have some benefits within the context of aging. Remember, we talked about a big part of aging is preventing disease. So I did some work with sulforaphane, or it's a bioactive component found in broccoli. It can also be found in, to a lesser degree, in other cruciferous vegetables like cabbage, cauliflower, and so on. So what I did was I looked at a rat model and I looked at breast cancer in these rats. And what I saw was that when these rats were given sulforaphane, they were able to live a longer life without cancer, breast cancer, okay? However, again, I want to leave you with the thought that we don't fully understand how exactly this applies to humans. So this is work that was done in a model organism in rats. And people often ask me, okay, so how much broccoli should I be eating? So my general recommendation is eat a healthy, balanced diet. Incorporate some of these things, because I know especially in Sri Lanka, it's not very easy to find broccoli. So it's doesn't really make sense for us to come to a country like Sri Lanka and say, hey, you should eat broccoli if you don't want to get breast cancer. But the good news is, yes.
Is cabbage not a replacement for?
It's not an exact replacement. So it's in the same family of cruciferous vegetables. So there are some components that will be found. So this low amount of sulforaphane can be derived from cabbage, but it's not really an exact replacement. But the good news is it's not just sulforaphane that has some of these breast cancer and other cancer preventive properties. There's a whole host of research. Unfortunately, I don't have time to share today. But yeah, so this is something that we have to think about. So generally try to eat whatever you can, try to eat healthy, and try to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. That's something I really recommend to everybody. The second example is vitafrin A, which is the bioactive component of Indian winter cherry. Some of you may have heard of ashwagandha. It's actually it's a plant that's commonly used in Ayurveda also. So what I was able to show was that ashwagandha, or the bioactive component of ashwagandha, was able to prevent liver toxicity and liver disease in mice. Again, the question remains, how does this apply to humans? Can we really use ashwagandha to prevent liver disease in humans? The research is not there yet, but hopefully in the next couple of years, we will have a little bit more information about how this directly applies to humans. My next example is cosmetics. Again, I've got a lot of questions about how do we age better aesthetically. In fact, I think I want to say about 80% of the questions that you get when you're a researcher in aging and longevity is related to aesthetics, not really, what happens inside the body. So I just wanted to show you, share this research that looked at stabilized 0.1% retinol. Some of you might already be using retinol within your skincare regimens. So what this study showed was that 0.1% retinol actually improved the appearance of photo-damaged skin in an 8-week study. So you can appreciate, the appearance of the skin generally tends to improve. And anecdotally also, you hear a lot of people talk about the benefits of retinol. So this is something that, you can incorporate into your skincare routine if, aesthetics of aging is important, which I think for many of us it is. However, word of caution, I want you to speak to a qualified dermatologist and to your doctor before using any of these products. And also make sure to use high quality products that are safe and meet regulatory standards. Because again, this is another thing that I've heard in Sri Lanka. There are a lot of products that might not be well regulated. Therefore, they might have a lot of trace chemicals, even heavy metals. So you might apply something thinking that it's going to improve your aging, but it's actually going to result in a lot of damage to your skin that might accelerate your skin aging. So it's very important that you keep these things in mind as well. Okay, so we're getting to the end of our talk. So we're going to do a small aging exercise. This is the last one. It's optional, so it requires you to stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down. So there's a little bit of movement involved. I want to make sure the chairs are not wobbly, and I don't want everybody to just, fall over each other by trying to do it. So again, it's optional. If you don't feel comfortable, you can, stay out of it. Okay, we have a very excited group. Excellent. Okay, so make sure there's space for you to stand up and sit down. So we're going to do a chair stand test. So what it involves is you start in a seated position, and then you cross your arms across your chest like this, and then you get up, sit down, get up, sit down. And you cannot cheat like my husband did yesterday.
Love it.
I did go.
So some instructions: you sit in the middle of the chair, that's your standing position, okay? And then place your hands like this, and then you keep your feet flat on the floor, and keep your back straight, keep your arms against your chest, and then when I say go, you rise to a full standing position, not yet, and then you're going to repeat it for 30 seconds. So I'm going to start a timer, and then just count in your head what it is, and don't count out loud.
So we keep going up and down.
Yes, so just and please don't push the chair in front of you, because that could result in a lot of problems. So make sure there's enough space for you. You're not going to knock over somebody else. Okay, are we ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Yes. Okay. And stop. Okay. Everybody has a number? Okay. So this is typically used to measure how accident-prone older adults are in clinical settings. I know you break a sweat, right?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you. Good job. So this is typically applicable to older adults. Again, I just want you to appreciate the fact that these are some tests that are done in clinical settings to measure how well you're doing, and if you have good balance, if you have good movement and things like that. So generally for older adults, and this might not be applicable to many of you, if you are able to do about 14 to 17, that means you're okay. Okay. And if you weren't able to perform, and there could be many factors, right? These chairs, you're not very familiar with it. So again, don't feel bad about the fact that you weren't able to do a high number of repetitions. So in the future, maybe we can work on it. So this brings us to sort of the end. I want to leave you with some parting thoughts. The first is aging isn't a bad thing. We just have to approach it with the same tenacity and preparation as any other challenge in life. This is where thriving through time comes in. We are trying to make it through time. As we get older, we want to really thrive, not just survive. And there are scientifically proven, simple ways to improve aging and to prevent many chronic diseases. In spite of what people might tell you, there are things that you could do, lifestyle changes included. There's a lot of misinformation out there. We touched upon this a little bit, so it's very important to check your sources. And then we are all aging as we speak. This is actually very important. I just want to point this out. We might think that we're going to age healthily, but for whatever reason, we might not. We might not be able to. So I also encourage you, and I invite you to look at your older adults in your communities, in your families, from this perspective of aging. So be kind and considerate to older adults. These are people who lived a very functional, productive, full life at one point, but due to aging, they are developing certain functional deficits, maybe cognitive deficits. So, approach it with that lens of being kind and considerate to them. The field of aging is evolving rapidly, so stay updated and stay connected. What we covered today was just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more information out there on aging research and also things that are done in clinics and so on. So I really encourage you to, keep up with this. I'm really happy that you came here today. Clearly you're curious about the field, but I encourage you to sort of continue to, learn and stay updated. So if you're interested in learning more, you can stay updated on these topics and learn about upcoming events and programs. I have a website that was recently set up, so I encourage you to check it out. I'm also on social media, so you can follow me. And then I also have a semi-functional YouTube channel that I'm hoping to put more content on, but time is of essence. Anyway, so here's my email. If anybody wants to shoot me an email, share your thoughts, I would really appreciate it. And very quickly, I wanted to acknowledge my partners and collaborators and also my team members. They've been really instrumental in me sort of getting started with my own work, my PhD training and my postdoctoral training. So I'm very, very thankful to all of my partners and collaborators as well. So if you're interested in partnering or collaborating, if you have any ideas, I'm always open to talking, chatting. So please get in touch. You have my contact information. And then the very last thing I'm going to ask you to do is provide me with some feedback for today's session. It would really help me improve the work that I'm trying to do within the context of aging and health and disease prevention. So if you scan the QR code, it'll take you to, it's not going to take you more than 15 seconds, hopefully. So yeah, provide some feedback, and then hopefully we'll be able to do a better job the next time. And that's all I have. And if you're done, I'm here. If you have any questions, if you want to share any thoughts, your experiences, if you want to talk a little bit more, I think we might have maybe a few minutes, unless you guys are rushing out. Yes?
Question. So there has been a lot in the US specifically on it's a good drug basically is what it is, right? There's tablets, there's powders, it's everywhere in the US. Mm-hmm. Is there any truth in it? Is it something that we should be thinking about because it's something that we eat every day mostly, right, in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I think so. So one of the things is, like I talked about within the context of supplements, it's very difficult to sort of say where is the scientific research and where's, all of this hype and the excitement and the marketing and the branding and all of that. So I think Gotukula is excellent. I highly encourage all of you to eat Gotukula, but I am not really certain that there's sufficient evidence to tell you that, topically applying a Gotukula, infused lotion is going to actually result in anything. So in a situation like that, I think you should continue to eat the whole, the plant or, in your sambal, whatever it is. Unfortunately, with a lot of these products, they also tend to be very expensive. So, with supplements, that's sort of the trade-off. You might be able to, like, if you can afford it, you might really go on like this 116 regimen that, Brian Johnson is on. But at the end of the day, like if you are financially limited, which many of us are, I think you should stick to, consuming what you can in terms of food. And then if you have some money to splurge, sure, you can try it out. If it works for you, continue to do it. If it's safe, if it's regulated, then yes.
And also in your lecture, you stress the ultimate goal is nuclear or cellular reprogramming.
Yes.
Pluripotent stem cell formation is the answer, should be the answer. Because all other methods with the drugs will not work that much because aging is a strongly programmed thing for the survival of most of the species. If the older generations want move out, there will be a problem for the whole species with the food and this thing. So it is so strongly programmed. So food like substances, chemical substances, it will be difficult to reach to the areas where it determine the cellular reprogramming. Nuclear reprogramming areas are in an area where it is so much guarded from outside into the.
Yeah, so that's one way of looking at it. I think I didn't talk much about cellular reprogramming today, but that's one of the.
That was the topic.
Yes, yes. So one
but
of the.
you put it, cellular reprogramming is the ultimate way. Even metformin should be working. All the chemicals and food even should
Correct.
be working, going through the filler programming, that the amount they are reaching and how deep they are reaching will not be sufficient to do a significant change.
Right. So what cellular reprogramming does is essentially, so you have your cells that are, at their nascent stem cell-like state. They become mature, but what cellular reprogramming does, it pushes the lifespan of the cell back to the stem cell-like structure. So they are more rejuvenated, they're younger. So you go from an old cell to a younger cell, basically. So I think there's evidence to suggest that some of these interventions do actually induce cellular reprogramming to some degree. However, like you said, there's truth to what you're saying in that some of these lifestyle interventions, it might be harder to do complete cellular reprogramming. But there is evidence that to some degree there could be, like cells, old mature cells assuming stem cell-like behaviors in certain model organisms, in laboratory settings and things like that. So I think with things like gene therapy and drugs that are very specifically targeting certain molecules that are directly implicated in aging, it's a lot easier to achieve. However, I want to also caution that when you do something like that, you tend to also have a lot more side effects, right? So which is why sometimes in some cases, doing lifestyle interventions may be more beneficial because the number of side effects that you might have might be lower. So it's really a trade-off, and we don't really have all the answers yet. And I think when you don't have all the answers, when you don't have all the evidence, it's okay to exercise a little bit of caution, because at the end of the day, we want to be safe. We want to also, not just get the benefits, the extreme benefits of some of the things that we're trying to do, but we also want to be safe, and we want to, protect ourselves against, some of these unwanted side effects as well. So, I think.
So at the moment, all the drugs targets the proteinaceous receptors. For the cellular reprogramming, we have to go for the nucleic acid, the DNA genetic level receptors. DNA-like areas.
Yes, but I mean, when you take the cell, there are multiple ways of hitting the genetic level also, right? So you can hit, protein.
Earlier proteins, and after the pathway will go, cascades will go.
Correct. Yes. So there are multiple ways of inducing cellular reprogramming at the genetic level.
Session 1, are you going to have another session?
Yes. So I hoped to, because as I was putting this together, it seemed like I could cover only like a fraction of what I wanted to cover. So I am thinking about making this into a series, which is why I included that. So, if you guys are interested, stay in touch, and then I'll try to share more information on that. So,
And the second part, will you be covering things like metformin research for all in those sessions you are having?
yeah. So I deliberately didn't cover it today because there's so much information within those. So I wanted to start with some of the things that are less discussed, like sulforaphane and vidafrin A. I would say those are sort of emerging. But yes, there are a lot of compounds like NAD precursors, resveratrol, metformin, and many others as well, spermidine. So this could go on forever and ever. But yeah, so this is definitely an option. Anything else? Any question at all? Yes.
There's something I saw in the paper, gitsamine or something. I don't know if it's a Chinese thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be for sugar.
Okay.
But I think, is it better to, like you say, use lifestyle things rather than go for supplements? Do you consider it a supplement?
I'm not familiar with
It's
this
called
component.
gitsamine or something.
Is anybody?
It's a capsule.
Okay, I'm
I
not
saw
really
it
sure.
on the internet.
Okay, so generally, I mean, like I said, there's so much information out there for a lot of these supplements and these molecules. If you don't know about a molecule, the first step should be to do extensive research on it. So we have so many resources now to do our own research. So just go read about it, gather as much information as possible, try to understand what the safety is, whether it works or not. Try to read what people are saying about it, but be careful, it could be sponsored content. So make sure it's not sponsored by somebody who's trying to sell that. So there are many things that you want to be, also considering when you're researching a product. Once you've done the research, if you want to sort of try it out, I always recommend that you speak to a doctor before randomly and haphazardly trying out different products. And in many cases, I think doctors who practice like Western medicine might discourage you from using some of these products because, a lot of these traditional, well, not traditional in this sense, but maybe like herbs or, plant product supplements, they can also cross-react with other medication. So there might be issues there, but I think you should talk to a proper qualified individual who can give you some guidance on it before trying out anything new, is what I would say. Yes.
As per the research, have you ever thought about breathe level? Because and earlier you mentioned about the bowel. That's the longest mammalian whale.
Yeah, the bowhead whale, yeah.
Which can live longer.
Mm-hmm.
Someone said the turtle.
Yeah.
Another one, bowhead.
Yeah.
The bowhead can hold the breath for the 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And turtle can hold the breath around in 60 minutes it can breathe only 3 times. Something like that. So
so actually respiration is very, very linked to the way your lungs utilize oxygen is very related to longevity and health, right? So for example, in humans also, there's a lot of excitement now with VO2 max levels. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Basically, it measures how well your body utilizes oxygen when you exercise, right? So this is also a very active area of research. I'm not really sure whether in humans there's any data to support, people who have better breathing capacity will live longer, just, while you're resting. But I think there might be something to consider in terms of respiration and, like how well you utilize the oxygen, basically, right? If an animal is able to sort of take in oxygen and utilize it for longer, that perhaps means that the utilization is a lot better. So, yeah.
Does it mean that anaerobic ability at the cellular level causes cellular aging less? Something like that.
I don't.
Anaerobic ability anaerobic stress, they can go through that anaerobic stress means that the cells are having some anti-aging effects.
Yeah, is that what you were talking about?
Nutrient control, calorie restriction like situation, oxygen restriction also.
Yes.
I'm not talking about the supplements and diet and everything, because the how much we eat, I believe what we eat depend on the things we eat. It's affecting our body, and also the also the breathing level. Breathing levels impact on our how organs are working. Organs are working, and as you said, the glucose level. While you are breathing, the glucose level also changing. As per my knowledge. So, what do you think about that?
So yeah, like I said, I think utilization of oxygen, once you take it in, what exactly happens to the oxygen, like once it enters the bloodstream and gets into your cells, is critically important. And it could be a determinant of, like how healthy you are, what exactly happens, how well the cells uptake oxygen and what they do with it is also very important. So I don't know whether there's any direct evidence. I mean, unfortunately, I'm a scientist, right? So I don't think there's any direct evidence to say that, you know, if you have an individual, if I understand your question correctly, you know, like the exact relationship between breathing per se and lifespan, you know, whether that increases lifespan in some ways. And I don't know whether there's
I
any
know
like
it's beyond human
phenomena,
human,
right?
Yeah, and also human abilities.
It's a limitation of substrates for metabolism extends lifespan. Limitation of substrates for metabolism,
Yes.
like that means food substances,
Yes.
calorie,
Yes.
that limit that extends the lifespan. There are substrates for metabolic process,
Mm-hmm.
calories also. Okay?
Yes.
So oxygen also such a substances, which comes to the metabolic process. So that is oxygen also gets restricted in case of less breathing less means ability also shows can withstand without using oxygen. Metabolically they can be kept inactive for some time. It says. Surviving the cellular level they survive also.
Right. So
Adaptation.
again, I want to like bring everybody back to where the evidence is, right? So theoretically, you know, we can sort of hypothesize that, you know, all of these things have happened, but again, it's very important to be able to tell, you know, what can be tested experimentally, what has been tested experimentally, and to sort of go from there. And I think these are very, you know, interesting points that you bring up. And I think there are, like I said, with respiration and VO2 max during physical activity, also during like meditation and things like that, there's active research happening. So hopefully in the next few years, we'll see a little bit more about how exactly that connects to lifespan and healthy aging. You know, and also, like you say, what are the cellular mediators of something like that? You know, are they specific metabolites, or is it sort of a more global response? We don't really know that yet. Any other questions? Yes.
You were talking about controlling glucose levels.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, based on science and evidence, what's the recommended daily intake of sugar per day? Like, is there any number of amount for the recommended daily intake?
Yeah, so unfortunately, this also changes depending on where you live. And I don't
Age
know
as well.
your age, correct. So I don't know what it is in Sri Lanka, honestly. But I think as a principle, it would be good if you can eat less sugar. I don't practice what I preach, unfortunately. But I think it's also important to pay attention to hidden sources of sugar, because, you know, there might be things that you might consume that might short eats, you know. So it's not also just added sugars, right? Like even carbohydrates. We eat a lot of, in Sri Lanka especially, we eat a lot of food that's rich in carbs. So it's also important to like very critically think about what you're eating. You know, somebody said you are what you eat, and that's absolutely true. So mindlessly eating things that might increase your sugar intake without really, without you really, you know, planning on it.
It's easier for us to say, like, no, we need to control glucose levels, but, you know, organically in Sri Lanka, like, we tend to eat a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
You know, if you have like 2 kidneys and, you know.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This morning.
Yeah. So I think, look, depriving people isn't also, you know, I don't think it works historically also. So I think if you're a generally healthy person, you are able to regulate your own blood sugar in spite of what you eat. And again, you have to always watch it, right? You have to measure it at least every year to understand what's happening. And I've actually seen it with myself. Like my blood sugars, like 5 years ago was, you know, close to 89. But more recently, it's actually been climbing up. So I'm still not at a pre-diabetic or diabetic state. But this to me says that I have to watch what I eat, right? And it doesn't only mean sugar. It also means carbs. It also means like other things. So just following, so it can be misleading. Just think it's added sugar. It could also be like the other types of things that you eat, like short eats and, you know, all of the other fun stuff that you get in Sri Lanka. It's so good.
The sugar lowering ability goes down with the aging as well as stress.
Correct.
So it has been shown SGLT blockers like Decoding and Decoding causes not only diabetic benefits, cardiovascular benefits also, but they still not known the anti-aging part like metformin. Because they can keep the level of sugar in the bloodstream low. That's what's more important. Otherwise, like oxygen, glucose also as monomers can react with the other macromolecules, DNA and proteins, destroy them.
Yes, that's one of the mechanisms by which.
React to chemicals. Yeah.
Correct. That's one of the mechanisms. They also have other pleiotropic effects. So with sugars, especially like glucose itself, they have, in the cell, many different types of ways of reacting with molecules and proteins and even specific metabolites. So I absolutely want to stress the importance of watching what you eat, and it's really up to you how you want to structure your diet, structure your meal, and things like that. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Anything else?
This is probably it requires a lengthy answer. I'll just ask you for a very short, it's too complex, but anyway.
Sure.
What are your views on how autoimmune diseases might advance aging or impact aging?
Yeah, this is actually a very hot area of research also. So something about autoimmune disease I want to stress. More than 80% of people who get autoimmune disease are women. And typically women are neglected in scientific research, or they have been. And now there's a recognition that, we have to, think about it. So oftentimes with autoimmune disease, you hear of these stories where people go to doctors and, sort of say, oh, this is not an issue. There, even within autoimmune diseases, there's a whole gamut of things, right? So things that are a little more hidden, that are very difficult to diagnose, like lupus, for example. And then, there are things that are a little more easier to diagnose. And I think there's a lot of interest within, like women's health and also women's health and aging to look at autoimmune diseases. There's a general sense that it probably advances aging because of the amount of stress and because of the activation of the immune system constantly that can actually result in an accelerated aging phenotype. But I think the science is not completely 100% there yet. So hopefully, again, in the next few years, we'll see a little bit more work there. Anything else? Okay, this was great. Thank you so much for everybody. Appreciate you coming here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.